Soy Luigi De Chiara, embajador de Italia en México. Soy muy feliz de presentar Encuentro Creativo, una producción de la Cámara de Comercio Italiana en México con la Embajada de Italia. En México hay un potencial de talento creativo que me parece no logra salir de sus fronteras con la presentación de la oferta formativa de esas instituciones académicas en el campo de las industrias creativas italianas. Queremos ofrecer no solo la posibilidad de mejorarse de un punto de vista técnico, sino también de saber dónde van las tendencias, cómo se ha construido el éxito del Made in Italy, sobre todo en el sector del estilo de vida.
Es un evento muy importante, Encuentro Creativo, porque da la oportunidad a los estudiantes mexicanos egresados de universidades o de institutos académicos de conocer la oferta educativa que hay para cursos de posgrado en el campo del diseño, de la moda y de las artes gráficas.
Así que durante estas 2 semanas de Encuentro Creativo van a poder encontrar tips y conocer acerca de las mejores universidades y institutos italianos. Van a poder conocer a embajadores, a ponentes que están trabajando en la industria, que son también académicos de estas universidades. La finalidad es que disfruten de Italia, que conozcan Italia a través de estos webinars y seminarios y que se aventuren a vivir en Italia y vivir una experiencia llena de conocimiento, de sabiduría y de diseño y de moda. Espero que lo disfruten y muchísimas gracias.
Pues bueno, muchísimas gracias. Hoy precisamente contamos pues, con una de las presencias fundamentales del diseño italiano, que es la escuela de POLI.design, fundada por el Politécnico de Milano, y que precisamente ahí hay como todo pues un gran despliegue de todo lo que pueden ser las opciones que hay para estudios de posgrado, para estudios de maestría, lo cual va a estar así desde cuestiones muy particulares acerca del diseño de ambientes, diseño de accesorios para la moda, nuevos paradigmas del consumo, diseño para la comida, diseño para los espacios públicos, servicios, que esto es una de las áreas en las que el diseño se está pues, desempeñando ahora en el siglo XXI, igual que el diseño estratégico, diseño de luz, diseño de muebles, diseño de ambientaciones. Todos los aspectos del diseño están en el POLI.design de Milano. Y particularmente hoy que estamos comenzando con esto este lunes, resulta que tenemos la presencia pues, de varias personas que van a hablar hoy con nosotros. Particularmente hoy el tema es la gerencia de diseño para el sector de lujo, nuevas tendencias en el diseño de retail, y precisamente para impartirlo va a estar con nosotros el maestro Lorenzo Morganti. Él es arquitecto y profesor en POLI.design. Ha desarrollado varios proyectos de investigación dedicados al sector retail y al diseño de producto, y es un coinventor que tiene patentes americanas y europeas en el tema. De 2013 a 2019, Lorenzo Morganti ha sido profesor de diseño de retail y visual merchandising, así como espacios para el retail en la Escuela del Diseño del Politécnico de Milano, donde actualmente está a cargo del curso de diseño de exposiciones temporales. Asimismo, nos acompaña Alexa Rodríguez, que ya es embajadora de POLI.design, y pues sin más preámbulo, yo creo que recibamos a Lorenzo Morganti. Muchísimas gracias por estar aquí hoy. Thank you very much for being here today, Lorenzo Morganti. I think I'm very happy to have you. Without anything else, I think you can start with your presentation, and then eventually we can add all the other participants, and we can have certainly at the final moment of the presentation, we can have some questions from our public. Thank you very much. You have the word. You have the microphone.
Thank you very much. Thanks to you for this very pleasant and introduction. And of course, I'm also glad to have here with me Alexa as a former student and today ambassador also of POLI.design. The theme we are, of course, dealing with today is design management for the luxury sector. So a specific area which is generally considered to be the one that is leading the way toward the evolution in the specific sector of retail design. So let's take a look at the new trends that are going on. And of course, I would like to start with a message, which is please don't worry, because even though already in 2018, there was, of course, a period of panic for retail. So there were many, of course, problems. There were actually several wholesale retail companies that had huge problems. And this actually made the people speak about a possible retail apocalypse. This was actually, of course, highly debated after the pandemic. You know, we're just restarting. So this is actually a theme. But I would like to say that the trends that we're analyzing are actually the trends that seem today the two possible solutions in order to recover, in order to finally restart. So no, there won't be a physical retail apocalypse. We won't become all digital human beings, because of course, even if the digital is important, the physical part will remain important as well. So the first trend that I would very quickly analyze is the digital push. Of course, we tend to think that the big majority and the big part of retail today is becoming digital. But the question is, what is the actual weight of online retailing in premium design in the luxury sector? And specifically, what was the actual weight of online retailing before the pandemic? As you know, the pandemic actually changed two things, but I have a former student here, and she knows that when I generally ask this question, a good number of students tend to answer very big numbers. So I have sometimes heard people saying that the actual weight of online retailing, specifically in the luxury sector, is more than 80%. Somebody said 90%, somebody says 50%. But the truth is that before the pandemic, the actual weight of online market, or the online retail market for the luxury sector, we are here referring, of course, to apparel, footwear, accessories, jewelry and watches, leather goods, beauty and perfumes. So a quite wide area of products within the luxury sector actually was only the 12%. This means that the good majority of the luxury market purchases were still happening in offline channels. So, of course, in brick and mortar stores. And this is, of course, why I started this short discussion with you, saying that there isn't actually the need of panicking about the future of retail, because if we just stay at these figures, it's actually true that brick and mortar stores will remain with us for a long period. But of course, the question is, what kind of brick and mortar store will we have? And first of all, what was the effect of the pandemic? Because it's indeed true that the pandemic actually pushed a lot this digital increase in the world of retail. These are actually the figures of the year 2020. I hope you can see them. Tell me in case you had any problem or in case you couldn't see them. So we actually saw a decrease of the luxury market. Unfortunately, the year 2020 saw a decrease in almost all sectors, luxury included, and we will say the areas of luxury that were not much affected by the crisis. But overall, we could say that there was a huge crisis worldwide in every sector. Luxury was also affected. And what happened was that the online sector of luxury could actually go on growing. This means that instead of the first forecast that we're actually saying that online retailing would go up to, let's say, 15 or maybe 16% of the overall market by 2020, the online channels actually outperformed, reaching a 22% of the overall. Of course, it's a 22% of a quite small number. This means that online channels could actually keep the forecast, while the stores, and this of course makes sense because a good number of stores were closed for a long period, not only here in Italy, but I guess in Mexico and of course in other countries as well. And this is why, of course, we saw this huge percentage and this huge decrease in the overall market. Of course, by 2025, the expectations are for the luxury sector to fully recover. So we have already started. So the figures of the year 2021 and of course the forecast for the year 2022 are already good. But we do expect the sector to fully recover and to restart growing by 2025. It's highly likely that this should happen within the year 2023, 2024. And at the same time, the forecasts still say that the online channels will grow on, but no matter what, no matter whether optimistic or pessimistic, all of this forecast will always tell you that the majority of course, the market will still remain offline. So why is online and why is the digital actually relevant and so relevant? Of course, this is true, particularly in the year 2020, when we said there was a huge crisis, mainly because the only part of course, the pyramid of luxury that did not fall, that did not see a decrease, was the top part of it. So the cluster which Alta Gamma and the studies that I'm showing you is responsible for the majority of the studies that I'm showing you. Alta Gamma is the association of some of the most important Italian companies dedicated to luxury, such as, of course, the food branch, the fashion branch, the design branch. This means that they have that Floss, Artenide belong to this association. At the same time, it's also Ferrari for the wines, together with Karel Bosco. Then, of course, you have from the fashion side, Versace, and so on. So the big players of the world of luxury in Italy are actually associated together, and they are monitoring the market, so that the numbers and the figures that I'm showing you are actually derived from their studies, such as this one. The source is, of course, the Boston Consulting Group that delivered this research specifically for Alta Gamma, but the market is the worldwide market. So this is also referring to Mexico, not just to Italy. And in the worldwide market, what they saw was that the top part actually saw an increase. So the highest possible part of the luxury market went on growing, and this was all due to the digital push. This means that this customer started buying more and more online. Anyway, more than they previously did. But in 2025, so this is why the market is still interesting, because this digital push could not, let's say, save the market of luxury. So the increase in the top part of the market was not enough, of course, to sustain the companies. And this is why today companies are again pushing and trying to get closer and closer to all of their customers, not just the top part of this market. Of course, by 2025, they foresee a sensible increase in not the very top part of the market, but the middle top part of it. But also they foresee a huge increase in the bottom, what we generally define as premium design. So the premium category, that part which is also defined and that can also be defined as affordable luxury. This is supposed to grow, and to grow significantly, because if you see the figures, we are actually referring to a potential of up to 690 billion euros, so a huge number. We said that digital actually already pushed and saved a part of the company already in 2020, but this is not enough. The digital is becoming important also because there is a part of the market which is today defined as digitally driven in-store revenue. I guess that all of you already experienced this kind of possible purchases, because for digitally driven in-store revenue, we refer to all of those purchases that happen after after searching online. So maybe it might be that you just search for the best shop, where, of course, maybe the best prices are available, but maybe you also discover that there is an interesting product and an interesting shop that you didn't know before, thanks to the internet, maybe thanks to the word of mouth on the social media. And all of this are actually defined as digitally driven. So the digital push is necessary to sustain even the brick and mortar market, because a good part of the revenues will become more and more linked to the online world. And also, I would add, I am now finally showing you some physical examples, because I am referring to physical stores. So I guess that you probably also expect to see something from the actual design of real stores. Some of the contemporary and more interesting case studies are already showing us interesting forms of integration of online and offline. It's not just what we previously called and defined as multi-channel, but it's a full kind of integration. This means that, for instance, if you had the chance to go and pay a visit in New York to the Nike House of Innovation, but I know that they are opening different houses of innovation worldwide, so maybe it might be in Mexico next. One in Shanghai already opened 2 years ago. The first one was this one that we're seeing in New York, and in 2018 they were already showing and allowing their customers to use this shop the look feature, which was a way to empower the visual merchandising of the store. So the visual merchandising, as far as you can see, is quite common. So there is not a physical special tool or a physical special look that you see, but rather you have small QR codes beneath all of the mannequins. And this QR codes is actually powering your mobile, so that you can go there, scan the QR code, and immediately have all of the items the mannequin is wearing, so that you can choose the color, choose the sizes, see all the information related to each and every item. And thanks to that, of course, you might also push a button, which is add to try on list, according to which you will have your choices immediately brought to a numbered fitting room. Of course, this entails a huge series of changes to the physical space. So, for instance, the fitting rooms are becoming crucial areas. They must be, of course, in central and widely accessible and highly accessible positions. They must be numbered, and needless to say that the sales staff have to pay attention to the code, so to be ready. Of course, with your app, you can virtually have a full shopping experience without ever entering in contact with any salesperson, if you do not wish so. Okay, this is a possibility that companies are actually eager to provide to their customers, mainly to avoid the so-called pretty woman effect. I am quite old, so I remember very well the film Pretty Woman. Maybe you are all young, and so probably you did not remember or you did not see this film. But take a look at that, and it's of course one of the most famous films with Julia Roberts and Richard Gere. And of course, there is this moment in which the main character, Julia Roberts, is actually ashamed because because the sales assistant do not behave, so they do not pay enough attention to her. And this is actually something that is quite common to a wide variety of consumers. So a good number of consumers feel, and of customers feel, ashamed whenever they enter the store. So thanks to this, you can actually fully customize your experience if you want a salesperson assisting you, or if you do not want. And moreover, you are actually saving a lot of time. To save time, this is not the only feature, but to save time, they also provided the store, which is quite big, which is a bigger surface than usual. So if we had to define the real trend of the store, is that this has more feature than usual inside a wider surface. And this is probably going to become a destination, so that the people Nike addicted will probably go or start going more and more to this store. And another feature that can actually allow you to save more time is the split shop, the so-called split shop. You already see here that there's the writing NYC favorites. This is actually highlighting the list of the favorites of the Nike communities in New York. This means that each and every city should have its own list of favorites that we change. This means that if you want to follow the trend that Nike fashion addicted are following, you can just pick up the numbers available here. And of course, once you have decided which item you want to purchase, you just directly go and you're guided by the numbers available. So quite easy, quite quick, and also engaging at the same time. Is customized for all the customers, and it's a possible interpretation of the digital push that we're seeing this day. Of course, I am just offering you few pills, so there are many other possibilities. I also have to say, as far as this particular solution is regarded, that this is quite similar to a first idea that was, of course, fostered always in New York by Prado 20 years ago now. Of course, they didn't push so much at the beginning on this, so they tried a lot of digital features that were very interesting, but they didn't replicate them all over the world due to a series of reasons. And I think that it's now the time in which many of those features are supposed to become usual, and to become common. And I guess that the world of luxury will also have to focus on this. But the other push, as I was saying at the beginning, is indeed the green push. There are, of course, here many issues to consider, but we are watching and we're facing a series of innovations that tend to lead the new stores to a more sustainable retail design. You also have to consider that it's something like 2 years now that the Italian Chamber of Fashion has published a sort of guidelines to sustainable retail, specifically focusing on, of course, high-end fashion brands, in order to provide them with useful suggestion to, of course, to deliver sustainable stores. If you are interested in this, of course, you can freely download the full documents online, just going on the website of the Italian Chamber of Fashion. I would briefly say that they focus a lot on, let's say, green architecture, what we define in Italy organic architecture. But I would actually suggest you to widen your view. And I would suggest you to widen your view because if we focus on some figures, these are, of course, the data that I downloaded from the United States Environmental Protection Agency, which also studied in actual industrial sectors, trying to define which and what weight in terms of greenhouse gas emissions these sectors have. When we say greenhouse gas emissions, we're not just referring to carbon dioxide, but to all the gases that can cause greenhouse gas emissions. This just to say in brief that I do hope that you could approach the theme of sustainability, of course, in a wider way. But let's start from this, which is generally the most famous, or let's say the most renowned. And this is just to highlight that each and every sector has its own weight. So retail design possible impact is actually cross-sectional. This means that retail design has an impact on buildings, on-site energy generation and burning fuels for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning in buildings. This is sometimes something that we do not consider, but of course, all stores need a comfort environment, and so all stores need heating, ventilation, and air conditioning according to the area of the world in which they are. Okay, and this, of course, entails a huge use of electricity and so on. Electricity itself and heat production directly, this means the burning of coal, natural gases, and oil for electricity, so the one that you use to power your mobile, to power your computer, to power everything, to light the spotlights that illuminate your wonderful mannequins inside the store. So this also has an impact. Transportation. And I here would like to highlight a lot the theme of transportation, which is particularly impacting whenever we refer, for instance, to online retailing. So we tend not to consider, or we tend to underestimate the huge impact of transportation, so of emissions from this sector, primarily due to online retailing. So yes, of course, this is something that is impacting physical store as well. But it's highly likely that the impact in these terms, in terms of transportation inside physical stores, is probably lower due to the fact that transportation are actually happening not just one item at a time, as it unfortunately happens when you buy something from an online platform, but more frequently, of course, you have huge transportation. So for a series of reasons, this is an important fact to consider, even for the physical store industry. And this is, of course, the part related to all the fit out that you put inside a store, to everything. But more importantly, I would like to highlight the fact that it's the life cycle that matters. And yes, even stores do have, as you can imagine, their life cycle. Here you have a small figure, which is derived by this association of 40 cities. In between them, you have also the city of Milano that belongs to them, that was delivered together by Arup and the University of Leeds with these 40 cities. And they decided, and they also studied the actual weight of each phase. So you have the raw materials, then you have, of course, the transport, then you have the manufacturing of the products, the transport, and so on. Then you finally have the operational use of one building. This is in general dedicated to the building, but in small, you can do a similar scheme exactly also for a small store. So today, for many reasons, all brands unfortunately still tend to focus mainly on the extraction of raw materials, which, as you can see, is just the first green phase on the top of the circle, which is just a small part of it. Okay. The most advanced brands will actually pay attention also when buying energy. What they do, they generally source it from renewable sources or from agencies that certify that the energy that they are, of course, providing is sourced out from renewable sources. Okay, so this is what is happening. But so far, only real estate companies, for many reasons, here I highlighted the main two: new regulations, economic stimuli, and partly because, of course, of a real commitment. But so far, only real estate companies have recently started focusing also on manufacturing processes and operational use. Operational use, as you can imagine, is quite important. Of course, it's not the glamorous world of retail design, because it's mainly in the maintenance, it's mainly, of course, in what you don't see. But that is highly affecting, if you focus, of course, on the two gray part of this life cycle, that is highly affecting the overall performance in terms of sustainability of the store. So therefore, since life cycle matters, first of all, what is the average lifespan of a store? I don't know if anybody can answer. Of course, I am focusing mainly on the Italian case. I don't know, maybe Alexa wishes to try and answer. This is something that she did not see during the lecture, so probably it's a new topic for her as well. because this is also a factor that we tend to underestimate. So people generally tend to overestimate the impact or the percentage of online retailing. And at the same time, people tend to underestimate the importance of the lifespan of a store. This is also due to the fact that, unfortunately, as you can imagine, but I think that you have an idea of this, store actually have a small life. Why? Because if we just focus on an average lifespan of a business, which is probably something you might be more familiar with, so not just of a store, but of any kind of business, I don't know what you would say. Does anybody dare to try and answer? I have to admit that I did not know this before I actually studied the figures. Well, don't worry, don't be shy. I will give you the answer because the actual answer is this one in 2002. So it's already a recent, it's a recent study. The average life expectancy of a multinational corporation. So we are referring, of course, to the biggest names was between 40 and 50 years. But this 1/3 of the companies listed in Fortune 500 in 1970 had been acquired, merged, or broken apart within just 13 years. And similarly, today, the average life expectancy of all firms, so don't just focus on Coca-Cola, on Ferrari, on Prado, but focus on the average. And the average life expectancy of all firms, regardless of size, in Europe and Japan, unfortunately, I don't have the figure of Mexico, is just 12.5 years. Okay, but this is also particularly true for the US, so I guess maybe for Mexico as well, because by 2010, it was 14 years, okay? No wonder more and more companies are looking at how they can become a more agile organization. So, no matter what kind of business, so no matter whether we are discussing, we are referring to retail or any other kind of business, the average expectancy, the average lifespan of a business is more or less about 14 years, okay? These are, of course, the figures that refer to the American market. Of course, there is a small number of big players that can last for more than 50 years, but the average of the first 500 companies by Standard & Poor's says 12 years. So very similar to the European and the Japanese 12.5. This is more or less. Consider this. Let's get back to my question, which is, and what is the average lifespan of a store, for instance, in Rome, Italy? I am sorry to say that it's 19 months, okay? Of course, this is the average, so you don't have to be too pessimistic. This means that there is also a lot of vitality. This is not bad, this is good, but we have to know this. So to get the right formula, to get the right investment, the right kind of investment, we do have to know this. So this is, of course, the average duration of a commercial activity that opens in Rome, according to the data released by the Chamber of Commerce in Rome. We have to say that on average, whenever we do the redesign, we redesign the interiors of a store in Italy, there is an average investment for a new brick and mortar store that is generally made upon a 5-year lifespan basis. What does this mean? This means that if you don't think that your brand, or if you don't think that that store will last at least 5 years, you should probably opt for a temporary store. And this is why there are a lot of interesting things happening, specifically within the fields of temporary and pop-up stores, because this is actually what's happening now. A lot of pop-up store, a lot of events, maybe store that last for no more than 6 months, and sometimes even for a smaller period. not just because of promotion. So of course, it's indeed a new kind of store that is strictly related to communication. So the brand do this, of course, to empower, to foster their brand awareness, but they do this maybe sometimes also to do business, to reduce, of course, the investment. And what is the impact of these on sustainability again? There are studies, according to this architect profile. She's working in Denmark for an architectural agency. And in this agency, they are in between the first who are actually decided to have a head of sustainability. So they have a specific sector and a specific professional who is taking care of the analysis of all their projects from the point of view of environmental sustainability. Of course, I am always referring here to environmental sustainability, but we'll see that this is not, of course, the only concern that we should have. But anyway, he did a wide analysis. This is also available online. So if you are interested specifically in this kind of studies, you can, of course, type his name and surname and take a look at his findings, which are very interesting. And what he says is that short building lifespans almost double the analyzed environmental impact of construction materials. What does this mean? This means that we are seeing a push in the reduction of the lifespan of buildings. Also, he says, because for instance, in Denmark, the regulations tend to consider as an average lifespan no more than 50 years. And he believes that this is actually having, of course, a side effect. The side effect is that the smaller duration your store, the smaller the duration of your store will be, unfortunately, the bigger the impact on sustainability will be. Paradoxically, we should try to do our best, for instance, to keep and preserve stores like this one. So of course, I picked up a store, a pharmacy in Italy, which is in Trisulti, and which was, of course, as you can see from the style, created in the 18th century, so at the beginning of the 18th century. It's still there, and paradoxically, this is more sustainable than any new luxury, either essence or perfume store or pharmacy that you could create because of its duration. In few words, what Moller is suggesting us is to avoid the risk of using short building lifespans, because this could actually lead to a sub-optimation. If you have a building which is not supposed to last for more than, let's say, 20 years, it's highly unlikely that you will invest on materials for the interiors that will last for more than 20 years. In other words, you will most probably pick up products and materials with a shorter lifespan, and the sum of this, unfortunately, will have a bigger impact. So this is just to say, of course, that the life cycle, to synthesize and to wrap up, life cycle is crucial. Your project is crucial. What you have in your mind is crucial. This means that you have, of course, in few words, to grant the success of your store for more than 5 years. If you can do so, you will not automatically, but most probably be more sustainable, okay? But let's take a look at the prehistory in the world of luxury, because we have to admit that even though companies seem very committed in sustainability today, this is something that they actually have discovered quite recently. Previously, I mentioned Prada, and I was referring specifically to the epicenters by Prada. The epicenters had a lot of digital tools, so they were pretty much ahead. They were indeed leading the way in terms of renovation of retail design at the beginning of the age 2000. The first one that they opened was the one in New York, but then they also opened an epicenter for Prada store in Los Angeles. And so probably some of you have also been there and purchased something there in Beverly Hills. And of course, we are not here focusing on the retail design in general, but specifically on the trend of sustainability in terms of environment. So if we had to assess this project today, we would be, of course, probably a little bit upset. Why? Of course, the main feature of this store is that this store doesn't look like a store because it's actually having no window. Okay, so it's almost as if the facade was literally non-existent, or at least this was one of the objectives of the Office for Metropolitan Architecture when they designed this project. They wanted it to be part of the walkway, and they actually wanted to enlarge the walkway, so to virtually transform it into a small square. So in New York, they opted for an inner gallery inside the store. Here they opted for a small square, which is partly covered and partly uncovered. And this square, in order to allow the people to freely enter and move, of course, has no fence, has no window, has nothing. So you might ask yourself, how do I understand? How do I get that this is a shop, and that this is a store if I have no window, which is if I, moreover, have no logo as well, which is quite strange. Why? Because there is an actual window. First of all, as we can see here, this square itself is used as a window. And then we can, while approaching, we can sense that we have this huge oval glasses on the flooring, which are the actual windows of the store that have become horizontal. So rather than having vertical windows, he transformed the windows in horizontal elements, which was quite engaging at the time, but I do think that it's still engaging probably nowadays. But what about the sustainability of the store? You remember that at the beginning, I provided you with a series of boring elements and in between them, there was heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. So here, the solution, of course, to provide the comfort of the customers in Los Angeles is that of an air curtain system. And unfortunately, we have to say that this is probably the worst possible solution in terms of power consumption, okay? It's also actually less effective than many other possible solutions available for store design. So I like to say that sustainability actually lies in what the customers don't really see. So a lot of brands tend to focus on the materials, as I said at the beginning. Some of them will focus on the energy that they purchase, but few of them, for instance, tend to focus on the heating, the ventilation, the air conditioning, which is actually quite crucial. It's probably one of the most important things. Of course, when we refer to general renovations, such as it was here in Prado, because if you are, of course, focusing on a small temporary store, it's highly likely that you won't work on that. You will just have to focus on the fit outs, the furniture, the mannequins, and so on. But whenever approaching an overall project, so an overall redefinition of a store, this is indeed one of the crucial elements that we have to focus on. And here are, of course, our horizontal windows that actually attract a lot and engage the customers. I would now just again speak a few words about sustainability in general, because as I was trying to say, sustainability is not only environmental, but is also, of course, social sustainability. Is paying attention to a wide series of objectives. If you are curious, of course, you can download the United Nations agenda, and you will see that it's not just one voice or one entry dedicated to the environment, but there are a series of things to take care of. And indeed, one of the things to take care of is, of course, the comfort not only of your customer, but of your workers as well. Okay, so this is a wonderful solution, very indeed engaging for the customer, but probably this is not the best possible solution for the sales assistant. Okay, so let's imagine that you are the sales assistant in charge of changing the visual merchandising of these windows, and of course you have to enter in that very uncomfortable area, and it's going to be quite difficult for you to put up in nice also visual merchandising, as you can see in the image on the right. So yes, this was a very interesting solution, but probably in terms of sustainability, we wouldn't consider positively today this example by Prado. So it's indeed interesting. It's indeed a case study which deserves to be studied. Today's also because it has a lot of features that were there for the first time, that really innovated the world of retail design. But at the same time, we probably might criticize the overall approach, mainly, I would say, in terms of power management and plant design. Let's now take a look at a more contemporary case study, which is the Stella McCartney case study. As you know, Stella McCartney is a brand that is very famous, particularly for her attention to the themes of sustainability. She started focusing on this since the very beginning of the business. In this case, also, we might actually be focusing on a few details, but let's now start with the analysis of the stores. So to better explain what I'm referring to, this is of course the logo of Stella McCartney, and of course in 2018, after 70 years partnering with Kering, she actually decided to be alone. This was a huge step because it was on that occasion that she decided, for instance, to start with her new monobrand stores, and she decided to completely change also the style and the approach. Then in 2019, she signed a partnership with LVMH. In this case, it's slightly different with the one with Kering, but of course, she has passed from one big group of luxury to another big group of luxury. And of course, since she was very focused on sustainability since the beginning, the store design and the visual merchandising of the brand are indeed crucial elements to communicate this commitment, or so they should be. Let's start from, again, one thing we don't focus on, which is the location. The location is actually a crucial location because she decided to open her new flagship store in 2018. So she had just left Kering, and she was becoming the only CEO of her own brand. And she decided to have a flagship store in a quite important area of London, which was 23rd of Old Bond Street. And that is, let's say, the place to be for a luxury brand. No doubt that this is true. Of course, probably in terms of accessibility, this is not the simplest solution. So let's imagine, for instance, having trucks and cars going back and forth in the very center of London. It's not certainly easy, but you have, of course, at the same time, you are also providing your customer with a very good, very accessible location. And of course, as Stella McCartney says, the Old Bond Street is probably one of the most prestigious retail locations in the world, not just in London. But I highlighted this thing of the accessibility because just with the choice of the location as a brand, you are already making a series of choices. Maybe you're not fully aware of that, but the very choice of the location entails a series of issues: accessibility, shipping, construction site, and management. So you don't just have to focus on the final consumer, on the customer, but also on the construction site itself. Why do I say so? For instance, because when focusing on the facade, we have this wonderful new slab made of concrete. This is precast concrete, so this has been done inside a factory and then brought there to the construction site. Therefore, as soon as you hear that this has been precast outside and then shipped there, you immediately understand that probably the balance in terms of sustainability is not so positive. But it's indeed true that they also focused on handmade, organic, and sustainable sourced elements. So not just in the concrete that we see in the facade. Even though the concrete is and the precast concrete panels are actually a signature element of the store, because she also decided to reproduce the old elements that she was used to in her country house. So the pebble dash that was so common, which is actually a cheap element with which all country houses in the UK are covered. This pebble dash was actually reproduced in the look and in the texture that she provided that she asked the manufacturer to provide these concrete panels with. This is, of course, an overview, but the pebble dash is not the only element. We do have also rocks inside the store, and the strange thing is that these are the real rocks that come from the house of Stella Mccartney. So this is, of course, something that is quite strange. A pebble dash, here you have a definition in case you did not know what material is this. This would be. This is a low-cost waterproofing material. It's actually quite simple, made of sand, cement, and you also have, of course, these very, very small pebbles. This is why it's called pebble dash that you see. Okay, it was, of course, used extensively in the UK from the 70s onward. And it was actually a cheap material. So she was trying, of course, to, let's say, renovate and to give a new allure to a cheap material. And I would say that as far as the aesthetics and as far as the design is regarded, this is indeed effective, very effective, because of course it's quite stylish and quite effective at the same time. So we have these good concrete walls, the texture is relevant, is interesting, and it's highly customized. So how to provide an overall idea of luxury? First of all, whenever you can customize each and every detail, because this is something that you couldn't have anywhere. Why am I saying so? Of course, because you have a precast panels that already has the holes and the possibility of the power in order to light the LED strips on the single shelves. So there are a series of elements that make these panels and these shelves unique. At the same time, of course, they also provided these pebble dash, because there are also pebble dash shelving units bearing lights within themselves. LED strips are becoming more and more popular and also more and more easy to use inside stores, and they can also, needless to say, provide you with color effects such as this one, thanks to the RGB system, red, green, and blue. So you just change the percentage of red, green, and blue, and you can either have your light, your white light, or you can have different colors as we are seeing here. Of course, another interesting details were the curtains and bulkhead that we saw probably previous, because previously you, I guess, already saw that there is no distinction between the wall and the flooring, because the panels are actually curved. And this is also, of course, another of those details, customized details that make the overall retail design of the store so special. But let's now focus for a while on the material, because she said that she was very committed to environment and she was very committed to the materials. So we also have to ask ourselves, what about these materials? This is, of course, the facade that I showed you previously. This is the same manufacturer. So the manufacturer that delivered the pebble dash styled panels inside also delivered this concrete panel, which has, of course, the holes and the LEDs providing the logo of Stella McCartney. But all of these panels are actually quite big. The one that we see here is was actually cast at 5 meters in length. So let's get back for a while to the issue of the trucks entering the city center of London. Okay, so it's not certainly somebody on a wheel that is leading few materials. So this also has, of course, an effect, an impact. And what about the material in itself? The material in itself, as we said, is concrete. This was created by this company. This is Mass Concrete, which developed for Stella McCartney this specific texture. This is also important, as I was saying, because this is actually customized. This is something that she can have, and it's only for her. And the surface of this finish is washed away to reveal the aggregate, so that you can see the pebble, the aggregate, so the pebbles. And at the same time, we do see also the fibers, because it's not only the pebbles that we see, but when we take a close look to this, we see the plastic fibers that are indeed necessary whenever reducing the thickness of concrete panels. This is, of course, something which is necessary because, as you know, concrete is very, very heavy. And so therefore, you cannot allow yourself to have too heavy panels just as a wall covering. So you necessarily need to reduce the weight. You necessarily need to reduce the thickness as much as possible. But as soon as you reduce the thickness and you want to avoid the cracks in the concrete panels, you necessarily have to use this kind of things. Okay. So the question again is, are these plastic fibers, is concrete in general so sustainable? Yes and no. I will get back to the first analysis, which is it depends on the life cycle. So we do hope, of course, that Stella McCartney will have a very successful store and that she won't need to refurbish these very, very quickly. I would say that in brief, the only features, the other features that, so features that this store is offering is a series of recycled materials. So for instance, we have the foam created from shrinkage, and also I would like to show you quite quickly the mannequins, which are also an interesting feature of the store, which have been done out of a new material, which is this one by Bonaveri, so the Italian company. And this is a participation of Politecnico as well. I was not involved in this project, but the team from Politecnico also helped Bonaveri to deliver this Be Natural. And this is, of course, a new material, which is made of Be-Plast and Be-Paint. So this is a bio-based polymer consisting of 72% sugar cane, so quite interesting. I don't think that this is the trend that will soon be available for everybody, mainly because the cost of this intervention is still very, very high. But I do expect this general green push that we're seeing to probably also help for a reduction in the cost of these materials. So this is where we are going. But in the meantime, so if the question was, what do we do in the meantime? In the meantime, I do think that beside the certification, beside the reproduction of the green elements useful, and beside, of course, the green elements for the paint, my suggestion would be, why not considering also existing elements? So to get back to the very beginning, when I showed you an old pharmacy, so probably I do expect retail designer to become more and more involved in finding things, okay, like you do for films, when you have a specific professional searching all around to find that kind of objects for the right styling that the director needs. I do think that probably retail designers should start doing this also. Of course, this is not the only possibility, and whenever you have a budget, you definitely, like Stella Mccartney, you definitely have to do something like this. So you definitely have to spend a little bit more on research. And I would stop here because we didn't have much time today, but I do hope that this, let's say, short bills about the latest trends are useful for you. And I would now leave the floor to Alexa and Gustavo.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. I think it was quite interesting because certainly when we speak about how is the retail industry in Mexico, we are like in a development stage. We have not been yet into these kind of considerations about we have to transform our industries. Nowadays, after COVID, we are only about the 4% of all retail in e-commerce. So we have a lot of way to walk. For example, the United States is in 20% of all retail is now e-commerce. But one thing that I really do consider is the same that Italy, the same as Mexico. We are countries that we have so much buildings full of history that it can be used, like you said, that it much more into sustainability to have the old historical buildings accommodating all kind of retail brands and of kind of new experiences. But I think there are some very interesting issues that we have to consider in order that our professionals, it's a real necessity that they go to POLI.design in Milano and can have these kind of experiences, as I'm quite sure and I'm certain Alexa Rodriguez has lived there. So Alexa, I invite you, give us your considerations, share your experience, tell us why we have to go to POLI.design. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lorenzo. Now you have the word, Alexa.
Well, hi everyone. Is it okay if I speak in English or in Spanish is better?
I think for our public, it will be better if you address them in Spanish.
Ok, perfecto. Entonces sigo en español. Bueno, hola a todos. Yo soy Alexa Rodríguez. Soy diseñadora industrial. Nací en la Ciudad de México. Me gradué del TEC de Monterrey en el 2016. Tengo 4 años de experiencia trabajando en la industria de diseño. He estado involucrada principalmente en el proceso creativo y de ideación. Y actualmente, como mencionaron, me encuentro terminando mis estudios de maestría. El curso es en Premium Design Management en la Universidad de POLI.design, aquí en Milán, Italia. Bueno, considero esta maestría un paso sólido hacia mi carrera profesional, siendo una gran oportunidad para guiarla hacia un approach un poco más interdisciplinario, basado en campos como management y marketing, que en México eso no se acostumbra a ver mucho, al menos en el diseño. Y bueno, en este caso en el sector de lujo, que como menciona el profesor Morganti, ha cambiado y ha evolucionado también tras esta pandemia, tanto en el aspecto físico como digital, y que bueno, yo considero interesante de analizar para actualizar siempre nuestro conocimiento en cuanto a diseño. Además de que tuve la oportunidad de estar en Milán, una ciudad, y bueno, Italia, que es un país referente en diseño de todos los tipos, moda, interiores, industrial y mobiliario. Y que creo que en México igual hay diseño de calidad, diseño de lujo y por supuesto talento en cuanto a diseño. Y es una oportunidad para globalizar un poquito más el diseño. Y bueno, les cuento que actualmente estoy terminando mi maestría, como había mencionado. Me encuentro escribiendo mi tesis y haciendo un internship en un estudio de arquitectura y diseño de interiores, donde he podido aprender de las diferencias del proceso creativo y del por qué se habla tanto de la excelencia del diseño italiano. Como mencionábamos, se habla mucho de la calidad en materiales, de los procesos de manufactura, y es algo que yo considero que en México también tenemos y deberíamos explotar un poquito más. Y bueno, aquí en el internship he tenido oportunidad de estar involucrada en proyectos de retail, de diseño de tiendas y de interiorismo para proyectos residenciales, y considero que estudiar en Italia es una experiencia enriquecedora en todo sentido. Para mí estudiar mi maestría aquí en Milán ha sido una experiencia llena de retos, hablando también un poquito desde el estudiar durante una pandemia global, que bueno, las escuelas, en este caso POLI.design y el Politécnico de Milán, también han implementado como muchos sistemas para que esto se haga de la mejor manera, y yo bueno, valoro mucho como todo el esfuerzo para poder aprender aún en la pandemia, y hablar de vivir en un país diferente, experimentar una cultura diferente a la tuya, ha sido súper interesante. pude ampliar mi visión personal y profesional junto a la oportunidad de seguir construyendo y ampliar mi conocimiento cultural. Y bueno, he aprendido y crecido gracias a la maestría, pero también la experiencia de conocer diferentes personas, culturas, vivir en un ambiente diferente al tuyo es lo que en verdad te queda de toda esta experiencia. Entonces, bueno, les recomiendo muchísimo, atrévanse y creo que también es momento de enseñarle al mundo que hay talento en México en cuanto a diseño. Y bueno,
Alexa,
también si tienen dudas de... Sí.
yo te quisiera hacer algunas preguntas. ¿A ti cómo de repente te surgió, pues estás en el TEC y de repente dices, ¿saben que voy a ir a Italia? ¿Cómo fue esto que te surgió? Y más que nada, de una manera más cálida, ¿cuál es lo que tú encontraste que es el paralelo del espíritu italiano con nosotros como mexicanos? Los dos son países emocionales, ¿no? Los dos son países que toman un diseño que está basado en el color, en la forma, en la emoción. O sea, esto no es diseño frío. O sea, estamos encontrando ahí un eco. Cuéntanos, Ale.
Sí, bueno, pues yo estuve trabajando 4 años en México después de graduarme, me gradué en el año 2016. Mi último trabajo fue en Kitsania, que creo que todos han de estar familiarizados un poquito, que se dedica tienen diferentes parques de atracciones en todo el mundo. El siguiente que va a abrir es en Italia, y bueno, yo tuve la oportunidad de viajar a Italia hace 3 años, y me enamoré de la cultura. Como dices, me parece muy similar a la cultura mexicana. El diseño se hace por pasión, y bueno, Italia siempre ha sido un referente en cuanto a diseño, entonces yo me enamoré aquí de la arquitectura, de la cultura de diseño que valoran muchísimo, y como dices, se diseña con el corazón en los dos países. Los italianos defienden a morir el diseño italiano. Para ellos diseñar en Italia es diseñar con excelencia. Y creo que también es interesante de entender un poquito las diferencias que tenemos con México. En Italia, cuando se hace artesanía, cuando es un trabajo artesanal, es diseño premium. Es diseño que vale la pena ver y que es muy caro. En México tal vez nos falta un poquito valorar que tenemos colores, tenemos texturas, tenemos procesos, y que en México dentro de puede ser no valorado tanto como en otros países. Entonces yo llegué aquí, empecé mi internship y me hablaban de materiales, yo les contaba de los materiales que usamos en México y descubrimos que teníamos muchas similitudes. Y entonces también como que te das cuenta que el diseño no está tan globalizado, que en México hacemos las cosas como las sabemos hacer en México, tal vez con un poco de influencia de Estados Unidos, pero tal vez en Europa no conocen el diseño mexicano. Entonces, bueno, mi tesis la estoy escribiendo un poquito de la globalización del diseño, de cómo inspirar unas culturas con otras, que es algo de lo que no se habla tanto, al menos aquí en Europa. Y para mí sí es la oportunidad de enseñar que en México hay materiales, en México hay recursos como nunca, y bueno, que hay talento y diseñadores apasionados por...
Qué maravilla. Y ya por último, me gustaría preguntarte, Alexa, ahora que algún día te reintegres a la actividad del diseño en México, ¿qué puedes aportar gracias a esta experiencia que tuviste en POLI.design? O sea, evidentemente hay diferencias, evidentemente vas a tener ventajas competitivas, evidentemente traes un know-how del Made in Italy que pues puedes aportar a la industria en México. Entonces, ¿qué perspectiva, inclusive de estas cosas que nos dijo Lorenzo Morganti, de todo esto que puede ser, hay otro nivel de retail en Europa? Él mismo nos mencionaba que en 2025 pues se van a estar restableciendo las industrias del lujo en Europa y en México, ¿eh? Y pues entonces, ¿qué puedes aportar tú de esta visión? Estar en Italia es una visión del futuro, no me queda la menor duda. Entonces, ¿cómo nos la vas a traer? ¿Qué va a pasar? Cuenta.
Bueno, pues lo principal sería un poquito, creo que esta idea que me quedé como en México existe el material para tener un diseño de lujo. En el mundo se cree que en México no se diseña con lujo, se cree que el diseño es básico, y creo que estas técnicas que tienen en Italia, esta mentalidad de excelencia en el diseño, es algo que podemos llevar a México, de aprender a valorar los procesos y de mezclar un poquito. Ellos se inspiran entre moda, aquí la semana de la moda, la semana del diseño de mobiliario son muy, muy valoradas y se inspiran unas con otras. Las cosas de moda, las cosas de retail, las cosas de interiorismo inmobiliario se nutren unas a otras. En México está un poquito peleado el diseño de moda, el diseño de interiorismo, y creo que también podríamos aprender a nutrir unas con otras. Yo en México me dediqué también varios años a diseño de retail, y sin duda me llevo de aquí un poquito el aprender a que hay que actualizar, que no te quedes con lo que aprendiste en la universidad, porque el diseño va evolucionando, evoluciona junto con la gente. El diseño nutre a la gente nutre al diseño. Entonces hay que seguir actualizándonos en qué está pasando ahorita en el mundo, cuáles son las tendencias, y se tiene que digitalizar un poquito la experiencia de compra, la experiencia del mundo de lujo. Creo que todo eso me lo llevo a México.
Pues muchísimas gracias, Alexa. Por favor, si alguien del público tiene alguna pregunta, escríbanla en el chat y nosotros te la hacemos llegar tanto a Lorenzo como a Alexa. Lorenzo, let me ask you a question. In this
Yes,
time,
please.
in these years that you have been teaching there at the POLI.design University, which has been your experience with the students coming, maybe not only from Mexico, but from all Latin America? The way of being of us Latin Americans going there to Italy. What has been your experience? What has been the perspective? Why a Mexican student has to go now to POLI.design in this particular moment of change for all the world after the COVID? Why do we have to be there in POLI.design?
Well, as Alexa was saying, I think that there are many similarities. First of all, probably it's easier, and I would say maybe, and paradoxically, it might be easier for an Italian and a Mexican understand themselves than for an American from the US and a Mexican, in spite of the distance. I know this might sound paradoxically, but I do think that there are many elements in common. Call it cultural elements, maybe call it habits, call it also, as you said, the passion or the love for the things that we do and the way in which we do the things. So I have never, for instance, had any problems whenever communicating to students coming from Latin America. So not only, of course, from Mexico, like Alexa, but we had students from Colombia, we had students from Chile. So we saw several students from Latin America, and of course we also have many students coming from Brazil as well. So all Latin American, not just, of course, North America, like you are in Mexico. And there is always, as I said, a sort of a common ground. So I do think that probably it's easier for these kind of students to understand the mechanisms and to understand also the things that we are trying to teach them, and then to transform and translate them in their home countries. So as you were saying, it's indeed true that in Mexico there are many valuables, historical sites that need to be preserved. So we do not, let's say, teach to transform anything in an international, globalized way. We try to teach whenever we can all students to pay attention to the context, to their culture, to try to preserve them. But also, if you get back to the history of, even from the period of the modernism, the Italian modernism, they had a huge attention for the pre-existing element of cultures that other modernist designers didn't have. And this is why I think that the exchange, it's easy. We have an historical series of examples of designers going to South America, and of course also of South American designers coming to Italy, because there are also designers that came here and that are still working here. So I think that this is possible mainly due to what we don't consider, maybe, which is our culture, so the start. So I do think that there can be a positive, very good interaction both between both professors, students, and the other students as well, because they will find mainly Italian students, and generally this is needless to say that for a Spanish-speaking student, it's quite easy to understand Italian, and this is actually helping them a lot, even in their life outside. I know, and I'm quite certain that probably Alexa could also go to a supermarket without having the need of speaking fluent Italian, because you know, it's quite easy if you speak slowly. It's possible for us to understand what you say. So.
Okay, thank you very much. There are some people with some commentaries and some also a little question. So they are congratulating you, Lorenzo, because of this view of the green, may I say, the green design. Here in the Latin American countries, we always speak about the orange economy, about the creative economy. But now this concept of the green value that is transforming retail, which is also a very good concept. Y te preguntan a ti, Alexa, ¿te fuiste hablando italiano o lo aprendiste estando allá?
Honestamente me vine sin hablar italiano, sabía lo básico. Hola, ¿cómo están? Puedo pagar con tarjeta, pero me vine aquí a aprenderlo bien. Lo aprendí en mis primeros meses y como dice Lorenzo, es muy fácil para nosotros que hablamos español, es muy similar, entonces es fácil aprender. Yo lo aprendí en 6 meses, digo, no soy experta, pero ya puedo tener una conversación en italiano.
For you, Lorenzo, they are asking, Ana Astorga is asking, Lorenzo, what do you think will be the perception of people regarding what you mentioned about fast fashion and that it is true applications because people still like personalized or customer service?
Yeah, indeed, I just mentioned, let's say, the two main trends, because a lot of money is being invested in digitalization and in, of course, sustainable issues. But indeed, and especially when you refer to luxury, customization is crucial. Also, the customer service must be customized, must be very specific, and must pay a lot of attention to each and every customer. What in general we could say is probably happening is that two kinds of customers, you remember that I showed you the different clusters of customers, are gonna probably become one very different from another. This is something that is happening, for instance, with the segment of top luxury, that will no longer have the need, for instance, of huge malls or huge commercial areas. An example of this is in the sale of champagne, where, for instance, Moët Chandon, you know that Moët Chandon belongs to LVMH, so a big conglomerate of luxury, he's already pushing a different format of apartments. So you do not see that store from the street. You have to book an appointment as if you were booking an experience, and you go there and you are alone and you have a sales assistant just for you. And the average spend per customer is actually something like 18,000 euros. So an incredibly huge amount of money. If you think that 18,000 euros in wine is something that a very, very small number of customers can afford themselves. This means that the store will also be completely different. I would also add that this kind of customers don't really wish to be inside a mall. But at the same time, we have to say that Moët Chandon is also selling their champagne in malls as well. So, and I'm not sure that they are likely to lose this part of the market. I do think that they do need both of their clusters. And this is why they will have to definitely differentiate this. This means that, yes, it will be highly customized. Yes, it will be personalized. And yes, customer service will become more and more important, moreover now after the pandemic. And there is also, I guess, another question. I think.
Well, I think we have a general comment almost there at the bottom that it says, maybe we can make both questions in just one, because for one side, Blanca Luz Montalvo, she says, could the Mexican design be interesting for the European market, textile and fashion particularly? And before of that, it says, hello, I was with a doubt how can we perceive Mexico from the European perspective, since it was said that Mexican design is a sort of a basic. So could you please explain more about this issue, please? So I think in both questions, I think is how is perceived Mexican design from the European perspective? And let me tell you, me, myself, as a Mexican design expert, I think we are still in a developing stage. So what do you both think?
No, I have to say that I don't actually know very well Mexican design, but I also have to say that today it's quite difficult to know the country of origin. So I do think that today, not all the countries, not all the brands wish their customers to exactly know where they come from. For instance, if you speak about sustainability, you probably make a reference to Veja. Veja is a brand that is supposed to be Brazilian. It was actually created by a French. Is made with Brazilian fashion, so it's I would say probably 99% manufactured in Brazil, but it's sold in France with a French management, with a French allure, and this of course has an impact. Just like Havaianas, you know, the name doesn't actually let you think that it's so Brazilian, and there are several examples like this. For instance, Fab India, who is an important Indian market, but was created by a British. Why? I do think that to approach the European market, you necessarily have to deal with somebody that knows that market very well. So this is something absolutely necessary. But I know that also when the Italian companies are approaching the Mexican, so vice versa, also when the Italian company are approaching the Mexican market, they do have, of course, to make studies and to understand better that market. In general, about the question, could the Mexican design be interesting for European market, specifically referring to textile fashion? Yes, I am absolutely sure about this. Of course, I think that the marketing side in this case would be crucial. Just as a way of an example, if I remember well, it was Fendi who promoted here in Italy. So it was the brand Fendi who decided to sell in Italy shopping bags made in Colombia, but made 100% in Colombia. So with a Colombian style, so with the South American style, so colorful, so you know, with the same materials. And to promote this, they didn't deny the origin of this product, because they also invited the dancers. So I expect that this could be wonderful also for the promotion of a Mexican product with all the Mexican folklore, with all the Mexican culture, which is quite huge and vast enough to allow you to promote something. But I think that it's in the management and probably in the marketing that you should pay, and that the Mexican designers should pay attention. Of course, there are top Mexican designers who already know this and who are already doing these things. But if you refer to the Mexican manufacturer in general, of course, if they want to approach the European market, they should, of course, focus a bit on marketing, on management, on this kind of things. But yes, the products are definitely, and also the design is definitely already prepared to enter the European market, because it's an international market. So I hope that I could answer the question.
Oh, yes, I'm not certain. Thank you very much. Bueno, pues creo que estamos llegando hasta el final, pero algo que quiero yo mencionar es que POLI.design del Politécnico de Milano tiene estudios de maestría en áreas tales como diseño de interiores y arquitectura, design business, que esto creo que es fundamental. Es un área que siempre se nos olvida. Los diseños como parte fundamental de una idea de negocio. Heritage, esto es toda la idea del patrimonio cultural, diseño de moda. En el siglo XXI es fundamental el diseño de interacción, el diseño digital, todo lo que sería la maestría en diseño de producto y el diseño de comunicación. Es fundamental que si alguno de ustedes está interesado en estas áreas, vamos a seguir hablando con la Universidad de POLI.design, pero si a alguno de ustedes le interesa acercarse, etcétera, recuerden que están las redes de Encuentro Creativo, donde los vamos a estar atendiendo y canalizando para que ustedes puedan ir, se puedan inscribir, puedan saber más de los programas que así les interesan, por supuesto. Y pues queda nada más ni nada menos que agradecerle a Alexa Rodríguez por tu experiencia y por compartirla con nosotros, al maestro Lorenzo Morganti, el podernos compartir su experiencia, su visión y tantos puntos que fueron tan reveladores acerca de cómo viene el mundo del retail, el diseño de tiendas. Muchísimas gracias. Y ahora Fariba Gallardo nos va a decir pues algunos quiénes son nuestros patrocinadores y cómo les agradecemos el participar en este evento. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Lorenzo y Alexa,
por este primer encuentro que tuvimos, bastante interesante. Chicos, POLI.design todavía va a seguir exponiendo dos webinars a lo largo de estas 2 semanas. Estamos iniciando con este encuentro creativo, con esta primera edición. Yo quiero agradecer a nuestros patrocinadores que hacen posible este encuentro creativo, iniciando por la Embajada de Italia en México, y también tengo una serie de patrocinadores como es Fénix, que es nuestro patrocinador oficial, Zegna, Yamamayo, Stavolini, a Ferrero, a Moretti Brothers, a Vialetti, Campari, Ferrari, San Pellegrino, el restaurante Capricho, Secretos del Vino, Riedel y Grupo Berlingo, que seguramente estas marcas les suenan, las han escuchado, han consumido sus productos, así que muchísimas gracias por hacer posible este encuentro creativo. Y como ya dijo Gustavo, nos vemos a las 11 de la mañana, dentro de media hora, y así vamos a estar a lo largo de 2 semanas. Por favor, visiten, vamos a grabar, quedó grabado este webinar, entonces lo van a poder ver de nuevo, compartir con sus amigos, con sus compañeros, por favor, en nuestro canal de YouTube, y cualquier cosa en el sitio web de encuentrocreativo.mx. Así que muchísimas gracias y nos vemos dentro de poco, y muchas gracias, Lorenzo y Alexa.
Grazie a voi. E arrivederci.
Gracias a todos.
Ciao. Arrivederci.
Muchísimas
Alla
gracias a todos.
prossima. Ciao.
Adiós, arrivederci.
Arrivederci.